Is the startup you work at a cult? Or worse, are you a cult-like leader? Sounds a bit extreme, but you might be surprised how many startups more closely resemble a cult than they do a company. Here's a few things to think about and red flags to avoid as you build your own following, your own startup. By far one of the biggest and most common red flags I see is when founders and startups refer to their employees as family. This one's a bit strange to me because my family, well, they're my family, and my coworkers, well, they're not. And as the saying goes, you don't get to pick your family, but you certainly do pick your coworkers and those you work with. When I hear bosses say, "We're like family here," instead, I hear, "We're going to treat you poorly and with disrespect because much like family, we can get away with it." Also, when companies or startup bosses use the word family, it almost implies like their work colleagues are more important than their family, and I'm sorry to say that's just not the case. I think instead of referring to coworkers as family, it's better to use a different analogy and say we're like a sports team, or even better, we're like a community here. That's really more useful, and when you think about it with regard to a sports team, well, the goal is to win. If you want to be close and have camaraderie, community is a great word for that as well. Next, do you or your founders have a very unhealthy obsession with company swag? You know, the t-shirts and other things with company logos that startup people tend to wear at events and pretty much every day. And as a small side rant, and I'm mostly talking to early stage companies right now, buying swag, well, it's kind of a big waste of money, to be honest. If you have really limited budget, you'd be much better served spending that money on things like marketing or other perks for your employees that they actually want. I think the really big red flag here, though, is founders that not only buy a ton of swag, but they force all their employees to wear it everywhere. Maybe it's fine if the founder wants to blaze their logo across their chest, but really in the workplace, no one should be telling anyone what to wear and forcing them to wear that. Besides, most startup swag, it's pretty awful. We probably could use a bit more fashion in our industry if we're being really honest with ourselves. Finally, and maybe the most important point here, you might be working at a cult if the founder puts more of the spotlight on themselves than they do on the business. I think a lot of founders get trapped in this kind of personal branding or thought leadership trap, and they start posting on LinkedIn every day. But again, you're putting the spotlight on yourself. Perhaps you think it's also shining a light on your business, but really it's not. I would say it's actually distracting from the business itself in two ways, both in terms of the brand and all that time you're spending being a thought leader, you're not spending working with your team, growing your business, learning about your customers. This is all that matters in the early stage. How many stupid likes you get on LinkedIn? Sorry to say, it just doesn't matter. There was a really good example recently too. There was this guy named Dan Price, perhaps you've heard of him. He is the CEO of a company called Gravity Payments. He was famous for paying all of his employees a living wage. Wow, big miracle, Dan, thanks for that one. And in general, he just constantly was navel gazing and putting the light on himself and his big pearly teeth. This got really awkward, and you can kind of tell, and honestly, kind of gave me the creeps. Sure enough, he's now facing several allegations of abuse. I won't go into the details of that, but I think it just really confirms my thought that if you're only putting the spotlight on yourself, maybe that's what you care about more, and worst case, you're probably a bit of a psychopath. Hey, let's do a quick bonus rant to wrap up this larger rant. Obviously, I'm having a bit of fun here as I'm talking about startups and cults, but it's not too far from the truth if we think about things like Web3, something I love to rant about. Crypto, blockchain, like all this stuff is a cult. It is a religion. You have to wear the NFT, you have to change your username, you have to follow the dogma, and if you don't, you're a non-believer, and of course the non-believers must be shunned. So this is a great example of how our industry tends to go a little bit too far when it comes to the work that we do. You're not on a holy mission. You're building an app that a handful of people use. You haven't changed the world yet. You might, but until that time, what really matters is what is the value that you provide? Are you helping your users and customers? Are you making them more successful? And then, are they the ones that are talking about you? Yeah, they might start to build a bit of a cult, but again, I like words like community. I think that's a much better, nicer word to think about. And if you do things right, you'll find that community does bubble up and start to talk about you. so you don't have to do it as much yourself. Thanks for listening today. Please be sure to sacrifice a goat on the way out, and while you're there, also like and subscribe to get more rants, and, of course, to join my ever-growing cult.